A ruthless Chicago mob boss expected a car bomb when a 6-year-old girl tugged his sleeve, pointing under his armored Mercedes. What he pulled from the freezing asphalt wasn't an explosive. It was a terrifying discovery that would ignite a bloody syndicate war and an intensely forbidden romance. The biting wind whipping off Lake Michigan was merciless that November evening, slicing through the bustling corridors of Rush Street. Gabriel Moretti, the undisputed head of the Chicago outfit, stepped out of the heavy mahogany doors of Gibson's Bar and Steakhouse. He had just concluded a tense 3-hour sit-down with Alderman Richard Dahlia, necessary evil to ensure the city's zoning laws continued to look the other way regarding Gabriel's new port developments. Gabriel adjusted the lapels of his charcoal Brioni suit, his breath pluming in the frigid air. He was a man of lethal precision, commanding an empire built on blood, loyalty, and silence. At 34, his icy blue eyes had seen more violence than most soldiers, and his heart had long since calcified into something resembling the cold concrete of the city he ruled. His lead enforcer, Aldrich, walked a step behind him, a menacing shadow wrapped in a tailored trench coat. Aldrich's eyes darted constantly, scanning the evening crowd of oblivious tourists and wealthy socialites. They approached the valet stand, where Gabriel's matte black, heavily armored Mercedes AMG 63 waited, idling with a low, predatory growl. Gabriel reached for the door handle. Mr. Burr. The voice was tiny, barely a whisper over the hum of the V8 engine and the distant wail of a police siren. Gabriel paused, his hand hovering over the chrome handle. He looked down. Standing by his knee was a little girl, no older than 6. She wore a thin, dirty pink puffer jacket that was entirely insufficient for the brutal Chicago winter. Her blonde hair was a tangled mess, and her large, wide eyes stared up at Gabriel with a haunting mix of innocence and profound trauma. Aldrich reacted instantly, stepping between Gabriel and the child, his hand slipping inside his coat toward his holstered sour. "Hey, kid. Beat it. Where are your parents?" Aldrich growled, his voice a low rumble of pure intimidation. The girl didn't flinch at the giant enforcer. Instead, she stepped around Aldrich's massive frame, reached out a small, trembling hand, and grabbed the sleeve of Gabriel's expensive suit. "Mister," she repeated, her voice cracking, "there's something under your car." Every instinct in Gabriel's body flared to life. In his world, a warning like that meant only one thing: C4. Plastic explosives wired to the ignition or a mercury switch. The O'Connor Syndicate, the ruthless Irish mob that had been encroaching on his South Side territories, had used car bombs twice in the past 6 months. Gabriel grabbed the little girl by the shoulders, gentle but firm, and physically moved her backward, shielding her with his body as he signaled Aldrich. "Get back, boss," Aldrich hissed, drawing a tactical flashlight and dropping to one knee to sweep the undercarriage of the G-Wagon. Gabriel expected Aldrich to shout, to order an immediate evacuation of the street. Instead, the enforcer froze. His flashlight beam illuminated the narrow gap between the freezing asphalt and the heavy steel chassis of the armored vehicle. "Boss," Aldrich said, his voice stripped of its usual bravado, replaced by genuine bewilderment. "It's not a bomb. You need to see this." Frowning, Gabriel crouched down, his knees protesting against the biting cold of the pavement. He took the flashlight from Aldrich and directed the intense beam under the car. It wasn't a wired package of explosives. It was a woman. She was wedged desperately against the inner frame of the rear axle, her body contorted in a way that looked agonizing. Her clothes were torn and soaked in dark, freezing blood. Her face was battered, a canvas of purple bruises and lacerations, but her eyes, a striking, defiant hazel, were wide open, staring back at Gabriel, blinded by the beam of the flashlight. She was shivering violently, her lips blue from the cold, and one of her arms was wrapped fiercely around a thick, leather-bound folio. "Please," the woman croaked, her voice barely audible over the idling engine. "Don't let them find us." Gabriel's mind raced. He was a predator, a kingpin who didn't deal in charity. His usual protocol for a civilian complication was to walk away and let the streets clean up their own mess. But then he looked back at the little girl, who was now clutching his pant leg, tears finally spilling hot and fast down her freezing cheeks. Suddenly the screech of tires echoed down the block. A dark grey Lincoln Navigator violently hopped the curb 100 yards away, scattering pedestrians. 4 men piled out wearing dark tactical gear and carrying suppressed submachine guns openly in the street. Gabriel recognized the leader immediately. Declan O'Connor, the unhinged nephew of the Irish mob boss. They were looking for the woman, and they were coming fast. Aldrich, Gabriel snapped, his voice a whip crack of authority. Get the kid in the car. Boss, we can't do it. Gabriel roared. He dropped entirely to the ground, reaching his large hands under the scorching exhaust pipes and freezing steel, grabbing the woman by her shoulders. She screamed in pain as he ruthlessly yanked her out from under the heavy SUV, sliding her across the abrasive asphalt. She was dead weight, her left leg clearly broken, blood pooling from a deep stab wound in her side. Gabriel hauled her up effortlessly, his immense physical strength taking over. He threw her into the spacious back seat of the gay wagon, just as Aldrich tossed the little girl in beside her. Bullets began to tear through the air, sounding like angry hornets. One struck the armored rear window of the Mercedes, leaving a spiderweb crater in the ballistic glass but failing to penetrate. Gabriel dove into the driver's seat while Aldrich hopped into the passenger side, returning fire out the cracked window with his Sig Sauer. 2 quick, deafening pops, and one of the Irish hitmen dropped. Gabriel threw the massive SUV into drive, stomping the accelerator. The V8 engine roared like a caged beast, the heavy tires spinning for a fraction of a second on the icy road before catching traction. He tore down Rush Street, running a red light and sideswiping a parked delivery truck to violently swerve around the pursuing Lincoln. In the rearview mirror, Gabriel caught a glimpse of his unexpected cargo. The woman had passed out, her head lolling against the luxurious leather seats, blood staining the pristine white interior. The little girl was curled against her chest, crying silently, clutching the leather folio her mother had been protecting. Gabriel's grip tightened on the leather steering wheel. His jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. He had just started a war with the O'Connors over a woman he didn't know. It was the most reckless thing he had done in 10 years. But as he looked at the blood staining his cuffs, he knew there was no going back. The St. Regis Chicago loomed over the Chicago River, a towering masterpiece of glass and steel. Gabriel owned the entire 93rd floor, a sprawling penthouse that served as his fortress in the sky. The private elevator doors slid open, and Gabriel carried the unconscious woman through the foyer, his expensive shoes leaving faint, bloody footprints on the imported Italian marble. "Get Dr. Aris," Gabriel barked at Aldrich, who was carrying the terrified little girl. "Tell him to bring a trauma kit, blood bags, O negative, to be safe, and tell him if he breathes a word of this to anyone, I'll cut his tongue out." "Northwestern Memorial is closer, boss," Aldrich pointed out carefully, setting the little girl down on an oversized velvet sofa. "If she goes to Northwestern, the O'Connors will have a corrupt cop killer in the ICU before morning," Gabriel snapped. He laid the woman down gently on the massive king-sized bed in the guest suite. For the next 2 hours, the penthouse was a blur of frantic, hushed activity. Dr. Thomas Aris, a brilliant but disgraced former trauma surgeon who now worked exclusively for the Moretti family, arrived breathless. He immediately went to work, stitching the deep laceration in the woman's side, setting her fractured tibia, and pumping her full of antibiotics and fluids. Meanwhile, Gabriel sat in the dimly lit living room, a glass of Macallan 25 resting untouched in his hand. The little girl, whom he had learned was named Lily, was finally asleep on the sofa, wrapped in one of Gabriel's cashmere throw blankets. On the glass coffee table in front of him sat the leather-bound folio. Gabriel hadn't opened it. In his line of work, curiosity usually got people killed, but the fact that Declan O'Connor was willing to shoot up Rush Street in front of Gibson's to get it back meant whatever was inside was worth millions. Or perhaps worth a life sentence. A soft groan from the guest bedroom pulled him from his thoughts. Gabriel stood adjusting his cuffs and walked quietly into the room. Dr. Aris was packing his bag. "She's stable, Mr. Moretti," the doctor whispered. "She lost a lot of blood, and she'll need time for that lead to heal. But she's a fighter. She's awake." Gabriel nodded, dismissing the doctor with a silent gesture. He approached the bed. The woman looked small amidst the dark silk sheets. The bruises on her face were vivid and angry, but the swelling had gone down enough for Gabriel to truly look at her. She was strikingly beautiful, with sharp aristocratic features and a stubborn jut to her jaw. Her eyes fluttered open, locking on to Gabriel. Panic instantly seized her. She tried to scramble backward, gasping in pain as her broken leg pulled against the splint. "Where is she? Where is Lily?" She rasped, her voice rough and desperate. "She's safe, sleeping in the other room," Gabriel said, keeping his voice deliberately low, trying to project a calm he didn't feel. "No one knows you are here." The woman stared at him, her chest heaving. She looked around the opulent bedroom, taking in the panoramic floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering Chicago skyline, the minimalist, expensive decor, and finally the intimidating, broad-shouldered man standing by her bed. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice shaking. "I'm the man who pulled you out from under a car while the Irish mob tried to turn you into Swiss cheese," Gabriel replied smoothly. "My name is Gabriel Moretti." He watched her eyes carefully, expecting the usual reaction. The name Moretti was whispered with terror in Chicago. It meant extortion, racketeering, and bodies buried in the foundations of new high-rises. But the woman didn't gasp. She didn't cower. Instead, a strange, calculating calmness washed over her battered face. She leaned back against the pillows, letting out a long, shuddering breath. "I know exactly who you are, Mr. Moretti," she said quietly. "My name is Emma Collins, and I need to hire you." Gabriel raised an eyebrow, genuinely amused despite the gravity of the situation. He crossed his arms over his broad chest. "Hire me? Miss Collins, I don't think you understand what I do for a living. I am not a private investigator, and I certainly don't take contracts from civilians. I am a senior forensic accountant for the Bessemer Trust," Emma continued, ignoring his condescension. "For the past 2 years, I was assigned to manage a portfolio of shell companies operating out of the South Side. A month ago, I found discrepancies. Massive ones, tens of millions of dollars being washed through legitimate real estate holdings. I dug deeper, thinking it was corporate embezzlement." Emma let out a bitter, self-deprecating laugh. "I was an idiot. I thought I was going to get a promotion for catching a white-collar thief. Instead, I accidentally unspooled the entire money-laundering network of the O'Connor Syndicate. Liam O'Connor's entire financial blueprint." Gabriel's posture stiffened. The O'Connors were powerful because they had infinite capital, but their financial infrastructure was a closely guarded secret. If Gabriel could dismantle their cash flow, he could wipe the Irish mob off the map without firing a single bullet. "The ledger you were holding," Gabriel stated, his mind connecting the dots. "The master flash drives and the physical count numbers," Emma confirmed, her eyes fierce. "They realized what I downloaded yesterday. They sent Declan to my apartment. We barely got out. They've been hunting us through the city for 24 hours. Gabriel stepped closer to the bed. The scent of her, a mix of sterile medical alcohol and a faint, sweet hint of vanilla, temporarily clouded his senses. There was a fire in this woman that he found intensely intoxicating. She wasn't a mob wife. She wasn't a hardened criminal. She was a mother backed into a corner, baring her teeth at the wolves. "Why me?" Gabriel asked, his voice dropping an octave, slipping into a dangerous, intimate register. "If you had this evidence, why not go to the FBI? The feds would have put you in witness protection." Emma looked up at him, her hazel eyes completely devoid of fear. "Because Liam O'Connor owns the director of the Chicago FBI field office," Emma said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "If I went to the feds, Lily and I would be dead before the sun came up." "Now but she reached out, her bruised fingers lightly touching Gabriel's arm. Their contact sent an unexpected jolt of electricity through his veins. "I didn't end up under your car by accident, Gabriel," Emma confessed, using his first name, the sound of it on her lips doing strange things to his heart rate. "I tracked your movements. I knew you were meeting the alderman at Gibson's tonight. I knew what your car looked like. I threw myself under it because I knew the only monster in Chicago big enough and ruthless enough to protect my daughter from Liam O'Connor." "Was you?" Gabriel stared down at her, stunned. He had thought he was saving a random victim. He thought he was the predator in control of the situation. Instead, this battered, brilliant civilian had played him perfectly, maneuvering the head of the Italian Mafia into becoming her personal bodyguard. A slow, dangerous smile spread across Gabriel's face. The spark of intrigue had just ignited into a roaring, uncontrollable flame. "Well, Emma Collins," Gabriel murmured, leaning in close enough that he could feel the warmth of her breath. "Congratulations. You just hired yourself a monster. For the next 4 days, the 93rd floor of the steep Regis became an impenetrable fortress. Outside, Chicago was quietly tearing itself apart. Rumors swirled through the criminal underworld and the polished corridors of City Hall alike. Liam O'Connor had put a staggering $2 million bounty on Emma Collins and the Ledger, dead or alive. In response, Gabriel had quietly locked down his territories, pulling his soldiers off the streets and waiting in the shadows like a coiled viper. Inside the penthouse, however, a different kind of tension was brewing. Emma's physical recovery was slow and agonizing, but her mind was a steel trap. Propped up against the velvet pillows of the master suite, armed with 2 encrypted laptops Gabriel had procured, she went to work. Gabriel spent hours sitting in a leather wingback chair across the room, ostensibly reading intelligence reports from his capos, but his eyes constantly drifted over the rim of his glasses to watch her. He had never met a woman like Emma. The women in his world were either hardened associates or delicate ornaments kept far away from the blood and the business. Emma was neither. She was civilian, yet she possessed a predatory intellect that matched his own. She didn't flinch when his men discussed weapons shipments in the adjacent room, and she commanded Aldrich, a giant of a man who terrified veteran hitmen to fetch her black coffee with the authority of a mob boss herself. Even more surprising was Lily. The traumatized 6-year-old had quickly realized that the scary men in suits were her protectors. She had taken a particular liking to Aldrich, spending her afternoons drawing crayon portraits of the hulking enforcer while he stood guard by the elevator banks. Late on the 5th night, a storm rolled in off Lake Michigan, rattling the reinforced glass of the penthouse. The lights flickered as Emma let out a sharp, triumphant breath. "Got him," she whispered, her fingers flying across the backlit keyboard. Gabriel immediately crossed the room, the scent of expensive cologne and dangerous masculinity enveloping her. He leaned over her shoulder, resting one heavy hand on the mattress near her hip. "Show me." "Liam O'Connor is old school, but his accountant isn't," Emma explained, pointing to a cascading spreadsheet of shell companies. "He's been washing his illicit cash extortion, gambling, narcotics through a massive commercial real estate development in the West Loop. It's called the Sterling Plaza Project. He's bribed Judge Harrison Caldwell and 2 city planners to fast-track the zoning." Gabriel's eyes narrowed. Sterling Plaza. That's $1 billion development. If Liam owns the equity there, he's untouchable. "He doesn't own it yet," Emma corrected, turning her face toward him. She was so close that Gabriel could see the golden flecks in her hazel eyes. "He's highly leveraged. He borrowed heavily against his offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands to fund the construction escrow. Here are the routing numbers, the authorization codes, and the digital keys to those offshore accounts. If those accounts are drained," Gabriel murmured, the strategic map of the city shifting in his mind. His escrow falls through, Emma finished. The legitimate banks will instantly call in their loans. His construction stops. More importantly, he won't be able to pay his soldiers. In your line of work, Mr. Moretti, what happens when the boss can't make payroll? His empire eats itself, Gabriel said, a dark, lethal smile spreading across his face. He looked at Emma, genuine awe warring with the intense magnetic pull he felt toward her. You are terrifying, Miss Collins. Remind me never to let you look at my books. Emma offered a weak, genuine smile, her guard dropping for just a fraction of a second. You saved my daughter's life, Gabriel. Your books are safe with me. The shared look between them hung heavy in the dimly lit room, thick with unsaid words and an undeniable electric chemistry. Gabriel reached out, his rough knuckles gently brushing a stray lock of blonde hair behind her ear. His touch was shockingly tender for a man who ruled with an iron fist. Emma leaned into his hand, her breath catching in her throat. For a moment, the war outside ceased to exist. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors of the bedroom burst open. Aldrich stood in the frame, his face paler than Gabriel had ever seen it. Boss, Aldrich rasped, his hand gripping his holstered weapon. We have a problem. The security feed to the lobby just went dead. The private elevators have been manually overridden from the basement. Gabriel's romantic haze vanished instantly, replaced by the freezing calculation of a wartime general. How? The building's mainframe is isolated. Someone gave them the override codes, Aldrich said grimly. Gabriel's jaw clenched. Only 3 people in his organization had those codes. His underboss, Dominic Bianchi, was one of them. Dominic sold us out. It's a kill squad. At least 20 men. Declan O'Connor is leading them. They are in the elevators now. Men, we had 3 minutes until they breached the floor, Aldrich reported, already moving to the reinforced gun safe in the wall. Gabriel turned to Emma. The fear was back in her eyes, but she fought it down, grabbing her daughter's stuffed bear from the nightstand. Get Lily, she said, her voice shaking but resolute. Aldrich, get them to the panic room behind the library, Gabriel ordered, racking the slide of a matte black M4 carbine he pulled from the safe. He strapped on a Kevlar vest over his dress shirt. Gabriel, Emma called out as he turned toward the foyer. He stopped, looking back at her. Don't die. I haven't paid your invoice yet. A grim smirk touched Gabriel's lips. I intend to collect every penny, Emma. Ha ha. The penthouse plunged into darkness as Gabriel killed the main breakers, relying on the ambient ghostly glow of the Chicago skyline bleeding through the floor-to-ceiling windows. He positioned himself behind the massive marble kitchen island, his rifle trained on the polished steel doors of the private elevator. Beside him, 2 of his most trusted guards, Marco and Elias, took their spots behind heavy oak pillars. The silence was deafening, broken only by the howling wind outside and the soft ding of the elevator arriving at the 93rd floor. The doors slid open. Instantly, the foyer was flooded with tactical flashlights and the suppressed thwip-thwip of automatic weapons fire. The Irish hitman poured out, moving with military precision, but Gabriel had the high ground and the home court advantage. Now, Gabriel barked. The marble island provided perfect cover as Gabriel and his men unleashed a devastating volley of return fire. The element of surprise was shattered. 3 of O'Connor's men dropped in the first 5 seconds, their body armor failing against the high-velocity, armor-piercing rounds Gabriel had loaded. Push forward. Find the woman. Declan O'Connor's voice roared over the chaos, frantic and unhinged. The gunfight tore the luxurious penthouse to shreds. Price's artwork was shredded by stray bullets. The imported Italian marble shattered like glass. Gabriel moved with terrifying efficiency, A predator in his natural habitat, he flanked the intruders, slipping through the darkened service hallway, eliminating 2 more hitmen with precise, cold-blooded accuracy. But there were too many of them. Marco went down with a grunt, a bullet catching him in the shoulder. Elias was pinned behind the dining table. Declan, realizing the heavy resistance, made a desperate play. He broke away from the main firefight, sprinting toward the hallway that led to the bedrooms. He didn't know where the panic room was, but he was going to tear the walls apart until he found it. Gabriel saw him move. Dropping his empty rifle, Gabriel drew his combat knife and sprinted after him, tackling Declan just as he reached the library doors. The 2 men crashed through the heavy mahogany doors, tumbling over the Persian rug. Declan was younger and fueled by frantic adrenaline, scrambling to bring his sidearm to bear. Gabriel was stronger, fueled by a wrath he hadn't felt in a decade. He slapped the gun away, driving his knee into Declan's ribs. Declan snarled, pulling a switchblade and slashing wildly, catching Gabriel across the forearm. Gabriel didn't even flinch. He grabbed Declan by the throat, hoisting him off the floor and slamming him brutally against the floor-to-ceiling window. The reinforced glass groaned under the impact. "You should have never come to my city," Gabriel whispered, his voice a demonic rasp, squeezing the life out of the Irish air. "My uncle will burn everything," Declan choked out, blood spilling from his lips. "Your uncle," Gabriel replied, leaning in close, "is currently bankrupt." Declan's eyes widened in confusion just as Gabriel delivered a final devastating blow, knocking the hitman completely unconscious. By the time the sirens wailed from the streets below, the penthouse was quiet. The remaining Irish soldiers, seeing their leader fall and realizing they were trapped, had surrendered to Aldrich. Gabriel stood amidst the ruin of his empire's crown jewel. His arm was bleeding, his suit was ruined, and his breathing was heavy. He walked slowly toward the hidden panel behind the library bookshelf and punched in the code. A heavy steel door swung open. Emma stood there, clutching Lily to her chest. When she saw Gabriel, bloodied but standing, a massive sob ripped from her throat. She didn't hesitate. Despite her broken leg, she hobbled forward, throwing her arms around his neck. Gabriel caught her, wrapping his massive, blood-stained arms tightly around her small frame, burying his face in her hair. For the first time in his life, the ruthless head of the Chicago outfit felt completely, unconditionally tethered to another human being. 48 hours later, the underworld of Chicago was unrecognizable. As Emma had predicted, the moment Gabriel's hackers hit the execution command on the ledger's digital keys, Liam O'Connor's offshore accounts evaporated into dozens of untraceable shell companies Gabriel controlled. The Sterling Plaza project collapsed by noon the next day. The federal authorities, acting on an anonymous, highly detailed tip, raided O'Connor's warehouses. Unable to pay his lawyers or his men, Liam O'Connor fled the city, a king without a kingdom, only to be found dead in a motel in Indiana a week later, a casualty of his own unpaid debts. Dominic Bianchi, the traitorous underboss, vanished without a trace. The outfit understood the message clearly. Gabriel Moretti's reign was absolute, and his vengeance was absolute. A month later, the first snow of December blanketed the city in a pristine, quiet white. Gabriel stood on the tarmac of Midway International Airport, the icy wind biting at his long cashmere coat. A private Gulfstream 650 stood idling, its stairs deployed. Emma stood before him, leaning on a sleek black cane, her leg finally free of the heavy cast. She looked stunning, her bruises faded, her eyes bright and alive. Lily was already on the plane, happily eating a plate of chocolate strawberries prepared by the flight attendant. "New Zealand," Gabriel said softly, handing Emma a thick, sealed envelope. The deed to a private estate outside Queenstown, fresh passports, and $20 million in clean, untraceable bonds. As promised, Liam is dead. You and Lily are safe. You are free, Emma. Emma took the envelope, looking down at it, then back up at the terrifying, beautiful monster who had saved her life. She stepped closer, closing the distance between them until she was brushing against his chest. "This is a very generous severance package, mister. Moretti, Emma murmured, her voice laced with that same fierce defiance he had fallen in love with. But there's a problem. Gabriel's brow furrowed. What problem? I don't want to resign, she whispered, looking up at him, her heart in her eyes. Who is going to audit your books, Gabriel? Who is going to keep you in line? Gabriel stared at her, the cold armor around his heart finally permanently shattering. A slow, breathtaking smile broke across his face. He reached down, wrapping his arm around her waist, and pulled her flush against him. Are you sure about this, Emma? He asked, his voice rough with emotion. Once you stay, I will never let you go. Boy. So wow. Emma reached up, her fingers tangling in the collar of his coat, and pulled his lips down to hers. I'm counting on it, she breathed against his mouth. As they boarded the plane together, leaving the freezing, blood-stained streets of Chicago behind for a few weeks of peace, Gabriel knew the truth. The little girl hadn't just found a ledger under his car that night. She had found his soul. If Gabriel and Emma's high-stakes fight for survival and forbidden love kept you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button. Every Mafia king needs his queen. But did you expect an accountant to bring down a syndicate? Drop your favorite plot twist in the comments below. Don't forget to share this video with your fellow romance drama addicts and subscribe to our channel for more thrilling stories.